Welcome to Community Update 170. The state of the networks by and large remains the same, except that on testnet 2, which is not yet available to the community, we have been making some progress and changes to get the performance numbers. But hopefully in a couple of weeks, we will be able to make the testnet 2 available to the community so they can work with and run their programs on there. And I'll speak to what is the difference in here with the testnet 2. So, but just starting with the main content of the work that the core development team is working on, the focus at this time still remains completing the block merge improvements and resolving the bugs, as well as preparing for hard fork 1, which is a balance only hard fork, as the main piece. And as we emphasized or mentioned many times in the last several debriefs, there are kind of two versions of the block merge going forward. One that requires a hard fork change, which is the removal of the channels map, and the other one is without that change, which then can directly go onto the mainnet as it is right now. So on the version that is kind of heading towards the mainnet is called O11 O alpha 2, and the one that will have the channels map removed will be in the O12 series. So Thomas has made good progress this last week on removing the channels map. He's still there's still some more work he needs to do, but once he is done with that, we will have the hard fork version of the block merge available on testnet 2, which then will actually help us or allow us to measure the actual block merge performance improvement that we would get, which is the eventual version, meaning the long-term version of block merge. So it may take, basically, because it requires a hard fork, it may take a few months to get on the mainnet, but whenever we have those hard fork changes, that would be the version of block merge that'll be continuing. So Gurinder is working on, I reported last week that with the current version of the 0.99 synchrony constraint and leader full block merge, we were seeing about a 7x to 10x performance improvement. But we will see what this removing channels map gives us, and Gurinder will be able to present some performance data with and without the channels map, what we're seeing next week. We were hoping to actually do it now, but basically what we have, the demonstration or the point of the data collection, I should say, there is to test the degree of scalability, because that is the claim and that is what we're focused on, to say, as we add more nodes, is the performance improving in terms of the total throughput of the network, and by how much? One of the issues that we're running into right now is that in the current configuration, it seems like our account is limited to like 800 CPUs, virtual CPUs, on the cloud provider, which we're trying to get it up because roughly speaking, you need the square of nodes that you're trying to run for us to do the tests. So if you, for example, if we want to test with 40 nodes to create that graph of what the scalability looks like, we'll need to run 1,600 CPUs. Or basically we need 1,600 threads, but because these are virtual CPUs, I believe they're mostly single-threaded CPUs. So that's what we, that's one of the things we need to resolve. And of course, Tomislav is completing the channels map removal. So in the next few weeks, we will have performance numbers on that, as well as a version then that's ready for testing. As far as the main, as far as the version of the block merge that keeps the channels map and hence has no need for a hard fork, the 0.11 alpha 2 and the next version of it that can go on the mainnet relatively soon is being worked on. There are some issues there that NutZipper is still working with, and Tomislav and Will are helping him with the tests. So that is moving forward. So I mean, overall, I think with this unanticipated need for removing the channels map and other things in the code base, we're probably about a month behind on the block merge in terms of actually getting it onto the mainnet, or maybe a little bit more, even though the first version of the block merge came in on time. But with all this, actually, you know how it is with software projects is that the last 20% of the work takes 80% of the time sometimes. So we ran into that a little bit here, but we are, at least I believe, we are close to the end of the tunnel at this point on this. And in fact, next week, we will be starting work on the proof of stake contract, which is what is needed for the fixing the bugs in there, is what is needed for the June, what is listed currently as the June milestone, which I will revisit and see if that is still realistic or if we're cutting it too close on that. But the work will start on that next week. So that's, I'm very happy about that, even as we continue to work and wrap up block merge, that the POS work will start. And we will have the ability within the next couple of weeks to get a proper estimate on the ability to deliver that on the mainnet. So that is something that's going on. Now, separately, Will is completing the running of the balances report, or creating the new state for the first hard fork, which is a balances only hard fork. I think he is right now running, or his code has caught up to about 600,000 plus blocks out of the, I believe, about 800,000 or so that need to be completed. So once that's done, we'll have some data for the community to verify, and then that will also help us prepare for the first hard fork. That's in process. Separately, out of one of the community members has done some very nice work, and folks that have been following the channels on Discord, on the mainnet and in development, have seen that work and what is reported. So that work involves a Rust implementation of parts of the Rolang interpreter, and the potential performance improvement that's demonstrated there is in the 100x range. And I think we're not at this point quite ready for a full Rust node unless the community wants to take that on. So I consider this 100x performance improvement sort of a future potential. However, we are going to start working with Jerry next week to see if what parts of his work, if any, can be either incorporated into the node, or perhaps there are portions of because he was mostly focused on the Rolang interpreter. So maybe there are portions of the node that actually would benefit from his Rust experience to do that. So we're starting that planning, and it'll probably take a couple of weeks to get our heads around that and come to an agreement on what those opportunities might be. So we are beginning to work with him to identify what those opportunities are. And there was also a request from the community to create a TPS goal or performance improvement milestone to the roadmap, which I'm going to do. And any planning or any things that come out of our planning with this Rust side of things will be part of that milestone. So right now, I don't know what that would be yet. But under this performance improvement milestone, we're going to capture both the hardware and software initiatives that we're doing that would lead to the performance improvement, so that the community can track that and see what the plan is to eventually get to a very high transactions per second number. So that's another activity that's going on. I think that's about all I have to say in general on the core development track. Are there any questions or comments from anybody about this, about any of this? All right, over to you, Greg.
Thanks very much, Rao. Yeah, it's very good progress. And it's much better that we take the time to get it done right. All right, Darryl, are you ready to give the week in review?
Sure. Hey, everybody. This is the week in review for April 29th to May 5th. On Thursday, the governance committee, we didn't have a meeting. Also on Thursday, the Dapps developer working group, the development of reward sheet for distribution of Ideathon rewards and RGov developer network document. On Friday at the Climate and Coordination RCast, we discussed home mortgages and climate change. The fact that over half of the US sees climate change as a critical threat. Green plans for Paris. RChain's exciting work on identity. And Facebook and Apple's war will be waged in VR and AR. On Saturday, they discussed the planning work group contracts for the developer network. On Monday's Casper stand-up, they covered doing linear algebra in Rolang. On Tuesday, in the RChain education call, they considered stakeholder structure for WANA toners and crowdfunding, looking for ways to fund a programmer. Also on Tuesday, yesterday in the communications working group, I gave an update on the state of the PR videos. We discussed issues around RChain's identity play, becoming a member of the Crypto Climate Accord, and thoughts on hiring an external PR company. Also yesterday in the Dapps developer working group, they were debugging RDev new group support capabilities. This morning in the RChain active member hangout, Raphael is setting up a Kubernetes stack. The main idea is to have a stack ready to scale 10, 20, or 100 observer nodes all behind the same IP address. Thousands of Dappy browsers might send explore deploys many times per minute or per second. Jim gave an update on RGov status and how the trust metrics part of it works. Gary expressed excitement and frustration as to why the world isn't freaking out about RChain. I talked about my thoughts around RChain's identity play and how it can affect the attribution and provenance aspects of a future blockchain-connected music industry. And an update from the Chinese community via Shusi. A Hiobi JV shareholder joined our community and became very impressed with RChain. He wants to join our external node and do something meaningful to align with our future growth. And that brings us to now. I would just like to again thank Jim Weitzcarver and Shusi for their help in this week in review. Back to you, Greg.
Thanks very much. Yesterday we had the May official board meeting. Nothing much was voted on. We did get the minutes approved. There was another minor vote just to make sure that we all agreed on the terms of a contract. Yeah, nothing major was decided on at the board meeting. We can, if there are any questions about the any of the internals of the board meeting, we can discuss those on Friday. Let's see, moving on. We have been slated to talk in mid-June on the Crypto Coin Show, so please promote that. And we do have lots of good things to talk about, extremely good things to talk about with respect to our hardware acceleration efforts, but we will save those for the Friday closed door session. I did want to begin to talk a little bit about setting up the stage for the offering that we call Daasl. I think it's important to begin to acknowledge that as RChain enters its new phase where it can scale, it will be more and more evident to Dapps developers that RChain is where they want to be developing their Dapps. As a result, we want to reduce the friction. I think most Dapps are not used to the kind of friction where you're going to have to pay for every individual access to the back end, which is, like for someone who's deployed a web service on top of Amazon, they're paying a monthly fee for all of the back end compute and storage and bandwidth. But when you're dealing with a blockchain, every single call to access the backend is going to cost you rev. Well, I mean, in the case of RChain. And so that introduces friction for Dapps. So one of the ways that traditionally the web has gotten around this is to have sponsored content flowing along with user app related content. And that is such a dominant model that it is in fact the world's largest economy. And so we believe that this is the sort of economy that we want to support. And we can do that with RChain with some very simple APIs. We've set up, for those of you who were here when Joe Denman gave his RChain, the Rolang 1.1 demo, hidden inside that demo was in fact the kernel of APIs that will allow us to provide the delivery of sponsored content across all Dapps that are running on top of RChain. And so we want to tokenize that and make that generally available. So this is that whole activity comes under the rubric Daasl, and we want to start talking about the market requirements here and how we're thinking about approaching the market and just generally getting people psyched for this this next phase of development and because we're very excited about it. And in terms of the economic opportunity, it's really many times larger than DeFi, for example, with way less regulatory risk. So we feel that this is very much the right kind of play, and want to get the community involved in discussing these ideas, promoting the ideas, and just generally raising awareness about this particular market opportunity. Anybody else want to from the Daasl team want to weigh in with thoughts, observations?
I'd like to.
Please.
Yeah. So I think that essentially what we're talking about here is somehow bringing a different form of advertising to the world. And I think that when you think about the potential for something like decentralized advertising, I think things get quite exciting. Currently, as Greg mentioned, online advertising is the largest industry in the world. It funds the biggest big tech companies. And the methods they use is called surveillance capitalism, if you listen to Shoshana Zuboff. It's not something that's particularly desirable amongst many of the masses. And this is part of why Facebook's, having its reputation issues. Surveillance capitalism has major problems. So there's two ways we can look at the problem. We can either put our head in the sand and try to run away, which is something that I had supported for years, being a fan of Jaron Lanier, who states that funding a society on advertising is like trying to get nourishment by connecting a tube from your anus to your mouth. And I subscribed to that viewpoint for quite a long time. But my mind has shifted since then, because I don't think that's going to solve the problem. I think we actually have to confront the problem head on. And to confront the problem head on, we need to create a different type of advertising, a type of advertising that actually supports the people being advertised and that actually doesn't involve spying on people. So there's another way to do this. And that's basically what I think we're talking about here. The problem with many dApps, as they start to kind of actually build on an actual layer one blockchain that actually works and scales, is that they're going to have to compete with free. People in the general masses are just used to signing up to a social network with their email and not having to pay for it. And the price they're paying is the privilege of being spied upon. So if we can offer some type of an alternative that provides advertising that allows the user to be empowered and allows the user to control how their data is being utilized on the network, A, we're going to solve the Facebook problem, and B, we're going to solve the DApp problem that many dApps are going to have in trying to fund their projects to put on a layer one blockchain. So that's kind of my soapbox statement there. I'll stop now.
No, I think that you make really good points. And they also fit in quite well with the other efforts that we have going on. So Steve Ross Talbot has done some great work on expanding the COVID passport to self-sovereign data and self-sovereign identity. In fact, recently, some members may have noticed that we put a video that Steve put together where he has stored the famous Thomas Edison quote up on the blockchain, which is a very clever thing to do, and is sort of speaks to some of the capability of RChain, and which we've been trying to point out for a few years now. But the fact of the matter is that as people start to utilize these self-sovereign data offerings like the COVID passport, the sponsors for those kinds of applications don't just have to be Starbucks or Nike. They can be the U.S. government or other healthcare providers that want to make sure that the latest information about the pandemic reaches the folks that need to see it, and as a result, they sponsor their use of the COVID passport in order to make sure that they have the right audience for healthcare updates. So this the mechanisms that we're building fit together in a particular way. And at the same time, as Darryl says, it's not just about surveillance capitalism. It's not just about manipulating people's attention in order to kind of grab as much out of their wallet as possible. Instead, there's a real opportunity for people to get the information they really want without being spied upon, and not just for individuals, but for communities to really say, we're interested in the following kinds of vendors and suppliers. So please, send us your information, as opposed to having them be manipulated and spied upon. So sort of fixing those social problems goes along with smoothing the runway, the on-ramp for Dapps to get onto the blockchain. So it's a win-win-win in many respects. But I'd love to hear from community members who are, may have questions or comments or thoughts.
Well, I had one thing I wanted to say.
Yes.
I think it's so important what you just said about when you said the word manipulated and spied on, and not just being spied on, because as I've done a lot of research in the past year or so about this, just because I've been more fascinated with it, probably because of the pandemic and just being online more, it's really not just like that people are being spied on, which is bad enough, but really I feel that it's that people are being altered, their opinions, their values, their behavior, how they spend their money, who they spend time with, who they trust, all that stuff gets altered all the time by these ad structures, and also the rabbit holes of content that people go down without even realizing that they're down there. And I just think that's another really important aspect to it, because a lot of people who haven't really studied this issue very much, like I've talked with some friends about it, and they're like, well, I'm not hiding anything. It's like, okay, that's fine. So I guess they don't really see the surveillance part of it as intrusive, which is scary enough. But what they don't really seem to realize is like how their values have been changed. And it's really sad that one more thing I wanted to say is I think it's really sad that we've so far kind of built a society that is basically kind of a dystopia online. Like we have a lot of the best minds in the world not focusing on curing disease or, solving climate change or space exploration or whatever, but they're just learning how to sell cars and shoes to people, which I think is like a huge waste of human intelligence. And the whole reason that we've built that infrastructure is just to make some advertisers like super rich. There's not even really like a human benefit to all this surveillance and all of this like super intense surveillance about purchasing patterns and what our political affiliations are and where we live and what are the places we most frequent. All of that is basically to serve these advertisers. There's really no need to gather this extremely fine data on billions of people without their permission while altering their behavior, unless it's to serve the advertisers. So anyway, I just wanted to say I feel like it's a lot more nefarious than just being spied on, but I'm so glad that you said manipulated too, because I feel that's really important.
Yeah, well, thank you, Nora. I mean, I think a lot of what we've seen with like, what was it, The Social Dilemma? Was that the film that came out?
Yes.
So we've seen that these platforms are organized in such a way as to manipulate people's attention, and we're providing the toolkit so that people who have a different value system, who would like to organize these kinds of offerings in a different way, can do so. And at the same time, it makes it possible for Dapps to compete with free, which was a very nice way that Darryl put it. Any other questions or comments about this?
Yeah. Do we have any sponsors yet for DApp development?
That is our very next item. We're looking precisely at who we're going to go to in terms of branding, and it is a two-sided market. So in particular, we need to both attract Dapps and sponsors. So building that up, I think, is important. The direction that I want to go is towards future brands, brands that are growing up with a thought about how the world is going to look tomorrow, as opposed to brands that are already established. I think, if we start there, it'll be, once we have a marketplace like that, then it'll be easier to attract larger incumbent players. But we really, I think it's important to recognize that if we don't wipe ourselves out with climate change, which is a very real possibility, that there's a lot more branding and commerce and DApp usage in front of us than there is behind us. And so it's I want to invest in developing a community of the future, so folks who understand how lifestyle may in fact change, and set their branding up in that way, and for multiple reasons. One, it prepares us for the future, but also because it'll be easier to work with folks that are just getting started on their journey, as opposed to organizations that are already established. And so we are very open to suggestions, very open to recommendations or connections. This is another way in which the RChain cooperative community can help out the platform and thereby help themselves out.
Yeah, I mean, if anybody has any contacts either with brands or small or large, or with the digital advertising agencies or platforms that you want to bring to us, that would be tremendous. That would be a tremendous help.
Yeah,
we need to connect them to this, or we want to talk to them about this new way of thinking about advertising and creating value in the society. And it helps the advertisers also, because instead of spamming or blindly blasting ads to people that don't care about that, we're actually creating a user-driven advertising ecosystem, which has a lot of benefit to the advertisers themselves, in that they're not wasting their ads on somebody that may or may not care about that. Whereas these are users actively seeking information or searching for things. So any contacts you have in the industry that could help us make the case to them, as well as perhaps understand from them as to what their objections might be to something like this, or maybe there are ways to improve what we're offering through such a dialogue.
Indeed.
Yeah, I think that, well, if we're successful in this, the ads themselves are going to be very different than what we're used to thinking about with advertising. I think that, perhaps one area to look at is kind of how the advertising system has evolved with podcasts, where you have, a particular podcast subject matter, let's say, Daniel Schmachtenberger, and at the beginning of the podcast is an ad for smart pills that he supports, or Joe Rogan or Tim Ferriss, some of the bigger podcasters, where they get the ads out of the way at the beginning, and they're usually something that they actually believe in and actually support. So it comes across less as you're trying to be manipulated and more like, oh, well, this is this product that this particular podcaster endorses. I see it evolving more that way. So I see that a lot of the actual advertisers are going to come on board with the Dapps. The Dapps will probably define, who the advertisers are going to be and why. So to reiterate, I think if we are successful in doing this, we're going to change how ads function, which is kind of echoing what Nora was getting at.
Absolutely. 100% agreed. All right. Any other questions or comments from the community about this topic or anything else that we've talked about or issues that you want to bring up? Very good. Thanks to all. Please stay safe and see you on the other side.